Have you ever sat in a modern movie theater, surrounded by dazzling special effects, and wondered how filmmakers create such incredible illusions? What if I told you that 2,000 years ago, without a single computer or electric light, the ancient Romans were staging spectacles that would leave even today's Hollywood directors in awe? Picture this: actors flying through the air, trapdoors swallowing characters into the underworld, entire naval battles unfolding right before the audience's eyes, all accompanied by thunderous soundscapes that made the very ground shake. This wasn't magic. It was engineering, creativity, and pure ambition on a scale that still feels breathtaking today. Welcome to the spectacular world of Roman theater, where innovation and artistry merged to create experiences that captivated millions. In an era long before digital technology, Roman engineers and artists mastered the art of illusion, crafting special effects that pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. They transformed simple stages into multidimensional worlds, where myths came alive and stories unfolded with a sense of grandeur and realism that audiences had never seen before. These weren't just plays, they were immersive events designed to transport viewers to another realm, evoking awe, fear, laughter, and wonder in equal measure. What made these achievements even more remarkable was the sheer ingenuity behind them. Using nothing more than ropes, pulleys, counterweights, and hydraulics, the Romans engineered effects that would challenge modern stage technicians. They simulated earthquakes, conjured storms, and even flooded arenas to recreate epic sea battles, all while maintaining an unwavering commitment to storytelling and spectacle. This journey into ancient Roman theater isn't just about uncovering forgotten tricks. It's about rediscovering a legacy of human creativity that continues to inspire us today. So, settle in as we travel back in time to explore the secrets, the innovations, and the sheer brilliance behind one of history's most astonishing theatrical traditions. To truly appreciate the wizardry happening on stage, we first need to understand the magnificent machines that were the Roman theaters themselves. These were not simple wooden structures. They were permanent, monumental feats of architecture, often built from stone and marble, designed to accommodate thousands of spectators, and engineered specifically for sensory overload. In Rome, the theater of Pompey wasn't just a place for plays. It was a massive political statement, a complex that included a temple, gardens, and a Senate meeting hall, seating up to 20,000 people. But this grandeur wasn't confined to the capital. From North Africa to Gaul and Britain, even provincial cities boasted their own impressive amphitheaters and theaters, each serving as a powerful symbol of Roman culture and engineering prowess. These venues were the absolute heart of Roman social and political life. Attending a performance was about far more than entertainment. It was a communal ritual, a chance for citizens from all walks of life to gather and experience shared stories that reinforced their identity, values, and history. Politicians funded these lavish spectacles to gain public favor, and emperors used them to demonstrate their power and generosity to the masses. The very design of these spaces was a masterclass in audience immersion, long before the term was ever coined. The semicircular seating area, known as the cavea, was carefully engineered to wrap around the stage, ensuring that even those in the highest rows felt connected to the action below, with acoustics so precise a whisper from the stage could be heard at the very top. This architectural genius was most evident in the Skene fronds, the towering multi-story stage backdrop that was anything but a simple wall. This ornate facade, often decorated with columns, statues, and multiple doorways representing different houses or entrances to the underworld, was essentially the ancient equivalent of a giant soundstage and special effects rig. Its height and solid structure provided the perfect anchor for the complex pulley systems needed to fly gods and heroes across the sky. Its deep foundation hid the labyrinthine network of tunnels and chambers beneath the stage, the hypogeum, where actors, animals, and elaborate machinery waited to make their sudden, breathtaking appearances through a series of trapdoors. The Romans didn't just build a stage. They constructed a sophisticated illusion-making machine where every architectural element worked in harmony to support the magic. But all of that magnificent architecture was just the shell. The real magic came to life through an array of ingenious machines hidden within it. While the Romans didn't have CGI or digital projectors, they were masters of practical mechanical effects, building contraptions that would seem right at home in a modern scene shop. Among the most clever and dramatically powerful of these devices were two relatively simple yet transformative tools, the ekkyklema and the periaktoi. The ekkyklema was essentially the ancient world's dramatic reveal platform. Imagine a heavy, wheeled platform that could be swiftly rolled out from the central doors of the ornate stage building. This wasn't used for just any entrance. It was reserved for the most pivotal, often shocking moments in a play. Its primary function was to bring the interior outdoors, to show the audience something that was meant to have happened inside a building, a moment too important to simply be described by a messenger. The most classic use was revealing the aftermath of a violent act, the body of a murdered character, or a hero surrounded by the foes he had just slain. By physically bringing this tableau into the full view of the audience, playwrights created an immediate and visceral reaction. The horror or triumph wasn't reported. It was witnessed firsthand, making the emotional impact far more potent. This clever device solved a fundamental problem in Greek drama, which the Romans adopted and enhanced: how to show, not just tell, the crucial events that drive the story. Working in perfect harmony with the sudden reveal of the ekkyklema was the periaktoi, the ancient solution for rapid set changes. These were triangular prisms, mounted on a central axle so they could be rotated. Each of the three sides was painted with a different scene, perhaps a forest on one side, a palace on another, and a temple on the third. Placed at the sides of the stage, a simple turn of these prisms could instantly transport the audience to a completely new location. This was a revolutionary leap in visual storytelling. Instead of lengthy pauses or characters awkwardly explaining where they were, the periaktoi provided an immediate visual cue, keeping the narrative pace dynamic and engaging. It allowed for a flow between scenes that felt almost cinematic, maintaining the audience's immersion in the story's world. The efficiency of this device meant that a play could jump from a king's court to a remote countryside, and then to a seaside cliff without ever breaking the spell of the performance. Together, these two machines gave Roman playwrights and directors an incredible toolkit for controlling narrative rhythm and visual impact. The ekkyklema delivered powerful, frozen moments of high drama, while the periaktoi ensured the story could move swiftly through time and space. They understood that theater was a visual medium as much as a literary one, and these innovations allowed them to manipulate the audience's focus and emotions with precision. It demonstrates a sophistication in stagecraft that goes far beyond simple storytelling. It was about creating a complete and believable reality, using every mechanical advantage available to amplify the power of the human drama unfolding on stage. While the ekkyklema and periaktoi mastered the art of revelation and location, Some of the most electrifying moments in Roman theater relied on pure, jaw-dropping surprise. And for that, the architects turned their genius downward, beneath the stage floor. This hidden world was the domain of the Charonia, an intricate network of trapdoors that transformed the solid stage into a dynamic, almost living entity, capable of delivering shock and awe on command. These weren't just simple holes with covers. They were precision-engineered portals between worlds, the key to some of the most unforgettable special effects in antiquity. The engineering behind these mechanisms was a testament to Roman practicality and ingenuity. The trapdoors themselves were crafted from strong, lightweight wood, often disguised within the stage's painted scenery or marble patterning to be utterly invisible to the audience. They were counterweighted and equipped with simple but effective pulley systems, allowing them to be opened and closed swiftly and silently by stagehands working in the hypogeum below. This subterranean space was a hive of controlled chaos, a maze of narrow passages, cramped rooms, and winches where actors, stage crews, and even trained animals waited for their cue. The timing had to be perfect. A mistimed appearance could ruin a crucial dramatic moment, so these operations were directed with the precision of a military maneuver, all to sustain the illusion for the audience above. Playwrights exploited this technology for maximum dramatic impact. In the comedies of Plautus, trapdoors were a source of sudden hilarity and frantic energy. A character desperately fleeing a soldier or an angry father might vanish through a charonia only to pop up moments later elsewhere on stage, leading to a chaotic chase sequence that would feel right at home in a modern slapstick film. The sudden appearance of a character from an unexpected location could completely upend the plot, creating confusion and mistaken identity, the very lifeblood of Roman comedy. It was a physical form of punctuation, adding an exclamation point to the farce unfolding on stage. In stark contrast, the tragic playwrights like Seneca used the very same technology to evoke terror, awe, and profound existential dread. Here, the Charonia became a literal gateway to the underworld. A trapdoor would shudder open, often accompanied by smoke and the chilling sound of simulated thunder from the bronium drum, to allow a ghost or a fury to ascend. In Seneca's plays, the spirit of a murdered king might rise to demand vengeance, or a prophetess might descend into the earth to commune with the dead. These weren't just entrances. They were profound metaphysical breaches, making the unseen spiritual world viscerally real and immediate for the audience. The effect was to externalize the internal torment of the characters, bringing their guilt, grief, or fear to life right before everyone's eyes. The versatility of these trapdoors knew no bounds. Beyond people, they could elevate elaborate set pieces, a sudden altar for a sacrifice, a tomb for a solemn scene, or even a small fountain to create a tranquil garden setting. There are accounts, particularly from the grander spectacles known as naumatia or staged sea battles, where the entire orchestra area in front of the stage could be flooded through massive hydraulic systems. In these incredible events, the Charonia served a dual purpose. They allowed for the sudden appearance of small warships and, gruesomely, for the dead sailors to disappear beneath the waves after combat, clearing the stage for the next act of the aquatic drama. This seamless fusion of mechanical innovation and raw theatrical ambition shows us that the Romans didn't just tell stories. They built worlds and then shattered them, all with the simple, breathtaking magic of a door in the floor. But if trapdoors connected the stage to the world below, the true pinnacle of Roman stagecraft reached for the heavens themselves. The most breathtaking spectacle an audience could witness was the sudden, glorious appearance of a deity descending from the sky to alter the very fate of the characters below. This was the realm of the famed Deus ex machina, or God from the machine, an effect so powerful it became a timeless storytelling trope. The machine in question was the machina, a robust crane-like apparatus cleverly concealed within the towering skinny fronds. This wasn't a subtle device. It was a statement of divine power made manifest through human engineering. A complex system of ropes, winches, and heavy counterweights allowed stagehands to smoothly lower an actor, often playing Jupiter, Apollo, or a goddess, down onto the stage platform. The actor would stand on a small, stable platform, perhaps surrounded by billowing fabric to simulate clouds, creating the unmistakable illusion of a celestial being gracefully entering the mortal world. The dramatic purpose of this grand entrance was to provide a definitive, often surprising resolution to a plot that had become impossibly tangled. When human characters had reached a point of inevitable tragedy or insurmountable conflict, the god would descend to settle disputes, reveal hidden truths, pardon heroes, or deliver prophecies that shape the future. While modern critics sometimes view this as a convenient way to end a story, for the Roman audience, it was a powerful reinforcement of the social and cosmic order. It visually demonstrated that the gods were ultimately in control, watching over human affairs and ensuring that justice, according to divine will, was served. The spectacle was as much a religious affirmation as it was a theatrical climax, filling the audience with a sense of awe and wonder at the intersection of the human and the divine. The engineering behind this feat was as impressive as its narrative impact. Safety was a paramount concern, as the failure of such a prominent effect would shatter the illusion and could cause serious injury. The counterweight system was meticulously calculated to balance the weight of the actor and their platform precisely, allowing for a controlled and steady descent rather than a risky, jerky drop. The ropes were likely made of strong, plated hemp, and the winches were operated by a team of experienced crew members who had rehearsed the movement tirelessly. The actor chosen for this role needed not just a commanding voice and presence, but also a considerable amount of courage and trust, placing their safety entirely in the hands of the stage technicians hidden high above them. This intricate collaboration between art and mechanics is a testament to the Romans' sophisticated understanding of physics and their unwavering commitment to creating a believable, immersive fantasy. Beyond the classic Deus ex machina, these aerial systems were also used for other thrilling moments of flight. A hero like Perseus, famous for slaying the monster Medusa, might be flown across the stage to symbolize his journey through the skies on winged sandals. The spirit of a departed hero could be gently raised to signify their ascension to Elysium, providing a poignant and visually stunning conclusion to a tragedy. In more comedic or fantastical productions, a character might be made to clumsily flap across the stage, eliciting laughter from the crowd. Each of these applications showcased the versatility of the technology, proving that the Romans used flight not just for divine resolution, but for any narrative moment that demanded a literal elevation of the story, making the impossible seem not only possible but vividly, breathtakingly real right before the eyes of thousands of enthralled spectators. And while the visual spectacle of flying gods and rising ghosts was staggering, the experience in a Roman theater was never just about what you could see. It was a full sensory immersion, and the ancient engineers were just as masterful at designing what the audience heard as what they saw. They understood that sound is emotion, it builds tension, Chinese letter evokes fear. It signals the divine, and it makes a fictional world feel tangibly real. Without microphones or speakers, they crafted entire soundscapes using a combination of architectural genius, clever mechanical contraptions, and live musical performance, all working in concert to pull the audience deeper into the drama. The very design of the theater itself was the first and most crucial component of their acoustic strategy. The semi-circular shape of the cavea, or seating area, was not an arbitrary choice. It functioned as a natural sound amplifier. The steeply raked stone benches acted like a gigantic satellite dish, catching the sound waves from the stage and funneling them upwards to every spectator. The towering skinny fronds, the ornate stage building, served as a powerful sounding board, reflecting the actors' voices back into the audience rather than letting the sound dissipate into the open air. Ingeniously, architects sometimes embedded large clay or bronze vessels called resonantia within the seating areas. These acoustic jars acted as Helmholtz resonators, tuned to specific frequencies to enhance vocal clarity and reduce echoes, ensuring that even a whisper of intrigue or a sigh of despair could be heard clearly by someone sitting in the very last row. This was acoustic engineering on a monumental scale, creating a perfectly balanced auditory environment for thousands of people simultaneously. When a play called for something more than the human voice, the Romans had an entire arsenal of sound effect machines ready backstage. The most famous of these was the bronium, a device dedicated solely to creating the visceral rumble of thunder. This wasn't a simple sound, it was a physical experience. Large, heavy sheets of bronze were stored in cavities above the stage or in the attic of the skinny fronds. When the script demanded a storm, stagehands would vigorously shake these metal sheets, producing a deep, rolling vibration that resonated through the very stone of the theater, making the benches tremble and unmistakably signaling the anger of the gods. For the sharp, cracking sound of lightning strikes, they might drop piles of stones or roll large stone balls down a specially designed wooden chute, creating a sudden, explosive crash that would make the entire audience jolt. The sound of wind was simulated by whirling a slatted wooden drum, known as a wind machine, against a taut sheet of canvas or leather, producing an eerie, howling groan that could build tension for an approaching ghost or a scene set on a treacherous sea voyage. Completing this immersive auditory world was a live musical score performed by a hidden orchestra. The Romans favored powerful, evocative instruments that could fill the vast space of the theater. The tuba, a long, straight bronze trumpet with a piercing tone, was used for military scenes, declarations, and moments of high drama. The cornu, a gracefully curved G-shaped brass instrument that wrapped around the musician's body, provided a more melodic but still commanding presence, often accompanying processions or underscoring emotional speeches. But the most advanced and awe-inspiring instrument was undoubtedly the hydraulis, or water organ. This was a masterpiece of engineering, using a complex system of water pressure to regulate airflow to its pipes, allowing a musician to play sustained chords and melodies with unprecedented power and dynamic control. The deep, rich, and versatile sound of the hydraulis could set a solemn mood for a religious ceremony, build terrifying suspense as a hero approached a monster's lair, or provide a lively Chinese letter for a comedic chase. This combination of architectural acoustics, mechanical sound effects, and live music created a layered and deeply impactful soundscape that made the drama feel immediate, real, and utterly unforgettable. Just as sound was engineered to captivate the ear, The Romans manipulated light and fire with extraordinary skill to command the eye and shape the mood of a performance. In an era without electric light, they turned the sun itself into a tool and mastered the controlled danger of flame to paint their stages in vivid, emotional color. The primary source of illumination was, of course, the sun, and the entire theatrical experience was meticulously scheduled around its journey across the sky. Performances were held in the afternoon, but this was no arbitrary choice. Playwrights and directors would carefully block their scenes to use the sun's changing angle for maximum dramatic effect. A tragic revelation or a moment of divine judgment might be deliberately staged as the sun dipped lower, casting long, dramatic shadows that amplified the sense of foreboding and tension. The orientation of the theater itself was a critical part of this design. Stages were almost universally built facing north. This ensured that the actors performing throughout the day were never forced to squint directly into the harsh southern sun, while the audience seated in the southern semicircle enjoyed a perfectly lit stage without any distracting glare. It was a simple yet brilliant use of the natural environment to serve the art. To augment this natural light and extend performances or enhance specific moments, the Romans employed a sophisticated array of artificial lighting. The primary tools were thousands of oil lamps, strategically placed in niches along the scaeny fronds and around the orchestra. These weren't just scattered randomly, their placement was a science. Polished bronze shields and mirrors were positioned behind and around these light sources to act as reflectors, focusing and intensifying the beams to illuminate key areas of the stage, much like the earliest spotlight systems. For broader, atmospheric lighting, large braziers filled with burning wood or charcoal were stationed at the sides of the stage, their flickering flames providing a warm, general glow that could define the space after sunset. The light itself was dynamic and alive, constantly shifting and dancing, which added a layer of unpredictability and raw energy to the performance that static modern lighting can rarely replicate. The fuel for these lamps, typically olive oil, was chosen for its relatively clean and steady burn, minimizing smoke and allowing for clearer visibility and better air quality for the massive audience. But the Romans saw fire not just as a utility, but as a powerful special effect in its own right. Controlled pyrotechnics were deployed to create some of the most unforgettable moments in theatrical history. In tragedies, particularly those dealing with themes of punishment and divine wrath, the climax might involve the simulation of a character being struck by lightning. This was achieved through a breathtaking combination of effects: the sudden, deafening crash of the bronchium for sound, while a pre-arranged stream of powdered resin or sulfur was dropped from above into one of the stage braziers. This would create a brilliant, explosive flash of light and a puff of white smoke, perfectly creating the illusion of a celestial bolt. For plays depicting great battles, like the siege of a city, stagehands would use long poles with pans of burning materials at the end to simulate the fiery arc of catapult shots raining down upon the walls. The most spectacular use of all was likely in the conclusion of a play, where a character met their end by being consumed by flames. An actor, perhaps wearing a flame-retardant costume treated with alum or standing on a fireproof platform, would disappear through a trapdoor as stagehands unleashed a controlled inferno of oil-soaked rags and sawdust, creating the terrifying and awe-inspiring spectacle of a mortal being taken by the gods. Managing such dangerous effects in a crowded, open-air wooden and stone venue required incredible precaution and planning. Safety was an ingrained part of the stagecraft. The hypogeum beneath the stage wasn't just for actors. It also contained large reserves of water and sand in strategically placed buckets, with a dedicated crew whose sole job was to watch for and immediately extinguish any wayward sparks. Many of the most volatile effects, like the resin flash, were conducted in small, contained metal vessels to prevent any spread of fire. The Romans understood that the thrill of the effect relied on the audience feeling the heat and witnessing the danger, but never truly feeling that the danger was uncontrolled. This masterful balance between breathtaking risk and meticulous safety allowed them to use fire not as a mere prop, but as a primal, emotional language. The warm glow of oil lamps could signify a peaceful evening or a quiet interior, while the raging blaze of a pyrotechnic display could communicate utter devastation, divine power, or apocalyptic fury, proving that long before the invention of the light bulb, storytellers had learned to write entire chapters of human drama using nothing but shadow and flame. Yet for all the fire, flight, and thunder, perhaps the most audacious special effect of all involved an element that was both incredibly difficult to control and breathtakingly simple in its spectacle: water. The pinnacle of Roman imperial showmanship was the Nemesia, a staged naval battle so colossal in its ambition that it defies belief even today. Imagine not just a flooded stage, but an entire arena transformed into a temporary ocean, complete with fully operational warships, trained naval crews, and a bloody, chaotic reenactment of history's most famous sea battles. This was not theater confined to a proscenium. This was a massive, immersive, and incredibly dangerous live-action event that placed the audience right on the shoreline of a manufactured war. The sheer logistics of a Nemesia were staggering, a testament to Roman engineering that borders on the obsessive. First, you needed a waterproof basin. Some emperors, like Augustus, built permanent, dedicated Nemesia venues, but others, remarkably, adapted existing structures. There is compelling evidence that the Colosseum's extensive hypogeum, the network of tunnels and chambers beneath the arena floor, was designed with a Nemesia in mind. To flood it, engineers would have first sealed the drains normally used to clear away water and blood from gladiatorial games. Then, they would tap into Rome's vast network of aqueducts, diverting a torrent of water through large lead pipes into the arena basin. The volume of water required was immense. Estimates suggest it would take over 7 hours of continuous flow to fill the Colosseum's arena to a depth even remotely suitable for floating ships. Once the spectacle was over, the real challenge began: draining millions of gallons of water, now mixed with debris, splintered wood, and worse, back out of the structure without causing catastrophic flooding or structural damage to the foundations. The entire process was a high-stakes ballet of hydraulic engineering. The spectacle itself was a carefully orchestrated chaos. These were not mere mock fights. They were large-scale reenactments of historical victories, often involving thousands of participants, prisoners of war, condemned criminals, and even professional gladiators trained as Marines. They manned 2 different fleets of ships, typically designed to represent specific warring factions, like Athenians versus Persians or Egyptians versus Rhodians. The emperors who commissioned these events, such as Augustus for the dedication of his Temple of Mars altar, or Titus for the inaugural games of the Colosseum, were making a powerful political statement. By recreating a famous Roman naval triumph, they were demonstrating their absolute command over nature, technology, and human fate. They could literally create an ocean and a war inside the city walls for the public's amusement, a display of power so complete it was utterly humbling for the citizenry. The sensory experience for the spectator would have been overwhelming. The air would have been filled with the roar of the crowd, the crash of ships ramming into each other, and the shouts of the combatants. The water, churning and frothing from the movement of the ships and the men fighting, would have sloshed against the arena walls. The battle raged until one side was decisively defeated, with participants expected to fight as if their lives depended on it, because they often did. While some were perhaps granted clemency for a brave performance, for many, this was a death sentence executed on an epic scale. The Naumachia was the ultimate expression of Roman spectacle, a fusion of brutal reality and magnificent illusion that showcased their unparalleled ability to reshape the world itself into a theater for the most dramatic story ever told, the story of their own power. Of course, the grandest illusions of naval battles and divine interventions were matched, in their own visceral way, by the gritty, up-close realism of combat and carnage on stage. For all their love of soaring gods and clever slapstick, Roman audiences also had a powerful appetite for the raw and the macabre, demanding that the violence of their tragedies and historical dramas feel shockingly authentic. This presented a unique challenge for the artisans of the stage. How do you simulate the bloody reality of a gladiator's wound or a soldier's death in the middle of a live performance, in a way that reads clearly to 20,000 pairs of eyes without actually harming the actor? The answer lies in a grisly but ingenious bag of tricks dedicated to the art of stage blood and gore. The quest for the perfect stage blood sent Roman prop masters to the natural world for solutions. One of the most common and effective sources was a red dye extracted from the root of the madder plant, known as Rubia tinctorum. By crushing these roots and mixing the resulting powder with water or a thin adhesive substance, they could create a vibrant liquid red that closely resembled fresh blood. This mixture had the perfect consistency. It could flow from a hidden bladder to simulate a bleeding wound, or be spat from an actor's mouth to show an internal injury. For a richer, darker hue more akin to coagulated blood, they might use a mixture involving cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide mineral that provided a deep vermilion color, though its use was likely handled with extreme care. There are also accounts, particularly for the most sensational spectacles, of using real animal blood, collected from sacrifices at the temples or from butchers. While this offered the ultimate in realism, complete with its unmistakable metallic scent, it also posed significant practical problems, from rapid coagulation and a terrible stench under the hot sun to the obvious religious and hygienic concerns of dousing actors in sacrificial material. The application of these substances was as clever as their concoction. For a simple sword slash, an actor might wear a leather undershirt with a pre-cut slit. Beneath that, a small pouch made from a pig's bladder, filled with the blood mixture, would be strategically placed. The thrust of a blunted stage sword would rupture the bladder, causing a sudden and dramatic gush of blood to stain the tunic. More complex effects involved hollow weapons themselves. A dagger with a retractable blade and a hidden reservoir in the hilt could, with a clever twist of the wrist, appear to plunge into a victim while actually releasing a flow of liquid down the grooved blade. For dismemberment, a not uncommon event in plays dealing with myths like the death of Orpheus, who was torn apart by Maenads, they employed grotesquely realistic prosthetics. An actor's limb could be wrapped in a sleeve of painted leather and stuffed with offal and blood-soaked rags. At the crucial moment, a swift, precise cut with a sharp blade hidden behind a stage knife would sever the fake limb, spilling its gruesome contents on the stage with horrifying effect. This commitment to graphic realism wasn't merely for shock value. It served a profound purpose in the cultural context of Roman entertainment. For a society where state-sanctioned violence in the gladiatorial arena was a regular and popular spectacle, the boundary between staged fiction and real-life brutality was unusually porous. The audience for a tragic play was likely many of the same citizens who would cheer at the games later that week. They were connoisseurs of violence, familiar with its sights and consequences. A poorly executed stage wound would break their immersion immediately, provoking laughter rather than horror or pity. Therefore, the pressure on the production was immense to get it right, to meet the audience's expert expectation for authenticity. This hyper-realistic gore acted as a crucial bridge, making the mythological or historical struggles of characters on stage feel immediate, visceral, and high stakes. The death of a hero wasn't a clean, poetic event. It was a messy, ugly, and physically devastating ordeal, making his sacrifice feel all the more powerful and real. Furthermore, this staged violence provided a strangely safe space for the collective processing of very real societal trauma. Rome was a state built on and constantly engaged in warfare. Many citizens in the audience would have been soldiers or had family who fought in campaigns. The graphic depiction of death in a tragedy could serve as a form of catharsis, allowing the community to confront the horrors of battle from a distance, through the safe lens of myth and legend. It reinforced shared values about honor, sacrifice, and the fragility of life. In a culture that so openly embraced the spectacle of real violence, the fake blood of the theater was not a cheap trick. It was an essential tool for telling the most serious stories they knew, ensuring that the emotional impact of a character's fate was felt not just in the mind, but in the gut of every single person watching. While the spectacle of naval battles and the illusion of bloodshed captivated the audience with their grand scale and visceral shock, some of the most powerful and nuanced special effects were worn directly on the actors' bodies. In the vast, open-air theaters where a performer's subtle facial expressions were lost to all but the closest spectators, the Romans turned to an art form of exaggeration and instant transformation: the costume and the mask. These were not mere disguises. They were sophisticated pieces of theatrical technology, engineered to convey character, amplify emotion, and execute breathtaking changes right before the audience's eyes, making the internal external in the most dramatic way possible. The most iconic tool of the Roman actor was the persona, a full face mask that served as the fundamental instrument of character and clarity. Crafted from lightweight materials like linen, cork, or carved wood, these masks were far more than static visages. Their design was a language in itself. Exaggerated, deeply carved features ensured that expressions of tragic grief, comedic joy, or tyrannical anger were instantly readable from every seat in the house. The mouth opening was not just a hole. It was carefully shaped, almost like a small megaphone, designed to catch the actor's voice and project it forward into the cavernous space of the theater, acting as a primitive but effective acoustic amplifier. Some masks were even designed with a metallic resonator built into the mouth area to further enhance this effect, literally giving a god or a hero a voice that boomed with divine authority. The mask effectively erased the individual actor, allowing a single performer to play multiple roles in one production simply by switching his persona. And it enabled male actors to seamlessly embody female characters in a society where women were barred from the stage. This transformation was so complete that the mask itself became synonymous with the character, a true persona in the original sense of the word. But the magic of these masks went beyond static representation. For certain characters, particularly in comedy and satyr plays. The masks incorporated simple yet brilliant mechanical effects. A satyr's mask might have hinged ears that could wiggle or horns that could extend at a comedic moment, operated by a nearly invisible string pulled by the actor. There are accounts of masks for characters like the Gorgon Medusa, which might have featured real snakes woven into the hair, creating a terrifying, writhing crown. Perhaps the most astonishing were the so-called pathetic masks used in tragedy. These specialized masks were designed for moments of ultimate despair, featuring built-in mechanisms that could simulate the flow of tears. A small hidden reservoir in the hairline or brow of the mask, filled with a dark liquid like wine or dyed water, could be released by the actor tilting his head slightly. The liquid would then travel through carefully concealed channels, emerging at the corners of the eyes to run down the carved cheeks in a perfect imitation of weeping. This was a special effect of profound emotional power, creating a visible, tangible manifestation of sorrow that could move an entire audience to shared grief. The actor's body beneath the mask was similarly transformed by the cothurnus, or buskin. These were thick-soled platform boots that served a crucial dual purpose. Practically, they elevated the actor, making him literally larger than life and more visible above the chorus and stage action. Symbolically, they conveyed immense social status and importance. The higher the soul, the more noble or divine the character. A king or a god would tread the stage on significantly higher cothurni than a common soldier or a slave, providing an immediate visual hierarchy. The costumes themselves were lavish and coded. A character in a purple-bordered toga was immediately recognized as a high-ranking official or senator, while a traveler wore a distinct cloak and broad-brimmed hat. For female roles, actors wore the traditional stola and palla, often in bright, contrasting colors to stand out against the marble backdrop. These robes were designed with a performer's needs in mind, featuring strong seams and strategic fastenings that would become crucial for some of the most exciting quick-change effects. The true pinnacle of this sartorial stagecraft was the quick-change act, known in Latin as mutatio vestis. In the frantic, mistaken identity plots of Roman comedies by playwrights like Plautus, a character often needed to switch roles instantaneously, to pretend to be a different person, a soldier, a merchant, or even a woman, often to escape a pursuer or pull off a clever trick. The costumes for these roles were engineered for speed. A single outer garment, like a cloak or a toga, might be reversible, featuring a dull color on one side and a bright one on the other. By simply spinning and flipping the garment, an actor could completely alter his appearance in a heartbeat. More complex systems involved layered costumes held together by breakaway stitches or ties that could be ripped apart with one strong pull. An actor playing a soldier might wear a rich tunic under a worn, travel-stained cloak. At the key moment, he would tear away the cloak to reveal his true, noble identity underneath, a revelation that would pivot the entire plot. These transformations weren't just for comedy or deception. In tragedy, a torn or disheveled costume was a powerful visual symbol of trauma and psychological breakdown. When a great hero like Hercules falls into a fit of madness, his pristine lion skin cloak might be violently ripped away, revealing a torn and stained tunic beneath, mirroring the tearing of his sanity. The act of changing a costume onstage became a ritual in itself, a visible metaphor for a character shedding an old identity or embracing a new, often tragic, fate. This fusion of practical engineering and deep symbolism shows that Roman theater understood a fundamental truth. What a character wears is not just decoration. It is an extension of their soul, and by mastering the art of the costume change, they could literally make a character's inner journey visible to everyone, from the emperor in the front row to the common citizen in the very last seat. While the masks and costumes transformed the actors, and the trapdoors delivered sudden shocks, some of the most awe-inspiring moments in Roman theater involved figures that were never alive to begin with. The stage was also home to automata self-operating machines and moving statues that blurred the line between art and reality, creating the illusion that inanimate marble and bronze had suddenly sprung to life. These were not simple props. They were complex mechanical marvels, showcasing a breathtaking fusion of artistic vision and cutting-edge engineering that allowed the Romans to stage the impossible. Driven by the same ingenious principles that powered their water clocks and astronomical devices, these automata relied on hidden systems of weights, gears, hydraulics, and tightly wound ropes. A heavy counterweight descending through a hidden channel could provide the motive force, its energy transferred through a series of wooden or bronze gears to create precise, controlled movement. In more advanced setups, the Romans harnessed water power. A carefully regulated flow of water from an elevated tank into a container could act as a timer and a power source. As the container filled, its increasing weight would trigger a mechanism, or the water itself would turn a paddle wheel, setting a figure into motion. For simpler effects, a team of stagehands hidden within the skinny fronds or beneath the stage floor could operate a puppet using a series of strings and levers, much like a sophisticated marionette. The goal was always to conceal the mechanism completely, ensuring the audience saw only the magic, not the machinery behind it. The dramatic applications of these machines were as varied as they were spectacular. In a tragedy, a statue of a god, perhaps Neptune or Jupiter, might slowly turn its head to gaze judgmentally upon a sinful character, its stone eyes seeming to glow from reflected light. Its arm could raise, pointing an accusing finger or brandishing a lightning bolt, a movement achieved through internal levers. In more elaborate productions, an entire fountain centerpiece might come alive. Mechanical birds perched on the rim could sing by forcing air through small whistles, while figures of nymphs appeared to dance as water flowed around them, their movement cleverly driven by the water's own current. The most common use was likely for divine epiphanies. Instead of, or in addition to, an actor being lowered by the machina, a breathtakingly detailed automaton of a deity might descend from the heavens, its movements fluid and majestic, to deliver a prophecy. This provided a chilling, otherworldly alternative to a human performance, making the divine presence feel truly alien and powerful. These illusions were more than just tricks. They were a powerful demonstration of Roman values and beliefs. By making stone and metal move, the engineers were showcasing tech and the skilled mastery over nature that was a cornerstone of their identity. It was a tangible display of human intellect triumphing over the inert world, a theme that resonated deeply in a culture that built aqueducts across valleys and roads across continents. Furthermore, in a religious context, a moving statue could profoundly impact the audience's piety. If a sculpture of a god could move, then the god itself might truly be inhabiting the image, lending a terrifying authenticity to the ritualized performance. This blurred the sacred and the theatrical, making the spectacle a genuinely spiritual event for many in the crowd. Perhaps the most famous account that hints at this technology comes from the architect Vitruvius and the engineer Hero of Alexandria, though his work was deeply studied and likely implemented by the Romans. Hero described countless automata, From a mechanical theater that performed an entire tragic play with moving figures to a device that would seem to magically pour wine and water from the same vessel. While we lack explicit play-by-play records of these devices in specific Roman plays, their existence in engineering manuals proves the technology was available and sophisticated. It is almost certain that the wealthiest producers, eager to outdo their rivals in the lavishness of their public games and festivals, would have employed such wonders to create a talking head for an oracle, a roaring lion for a triumph, or a gliding goddess to bring a performance to a truly unforgettable close. These moving statues represent the absolute zenith of Roman special effects, where art and machine became one to create moments of pure, unadulterated wonder. And just as they mastered the elements of earth, water, and fire, the Romans also learned to command the very air on stage, using smoke and mist to shroud their stories in layers of mystery and divine atmosphere. This was not merely a visual effect. It was a powerful narrative tool that could instantly transform the mood of a scene, signaling a shift from the mortal world to something ancient, sacred, or terrifyingly supernatural. Without modern fog machines, their methods were a testament to practical chemistry and clever stage management, creating ethereal veils that captivated the audience's imagination. The most common and accessible method for generating a hazy atmosphere was the strategic use of incense burners, or thymiteria. These ornate brass or clay vessels, filled with smoldering charcoal, would be loaded with aromatic resins like frankincense and myrrh. When these precious granules met the hot coals, they would produce a thick, fragrant, and visually dense smoke. Stagehands would carefully carry these burners or place them in key locations, allowing the perfumed smoke to slowly waft across the stage floor. This technique was particularly effective for scenes set in temples or involving religious rituals, as the smell itself was intrinsically linked to worship in the Roman world. The scent of incense would instantly tell the audience that they were in a sacred space, even before a single word was spoken by a priest or oracle. The smoke created a visible barrier between the mundane and the holy, making the divine presence on stage feel almost tangible. For creating a broader, more chilling mist that could fill the entire orchestra area, the Romans turned to a simpler but highly effective method: boiling water. Large, hidden cauldrons of water would be heated over braziers backstage or in the hypogeum. At the precise moment called for in the script, stagehands would pour this hot water onto piles of cool stones stored in large, flat pans. The dramatic temperature difference caused an instant and voluminous eruption of steam and vapor. This dense, white mist would cling low to the ground, rolling out from beneath the stage through the charonia or from the sides, creating the perfect impression of a cold, damp morning, a desolate marshland, or most importantly, the chilling breath of the underworld. In plays like Seneca's tragedies, where a character might descend to Hades or a ghost would rise, this ground-hugging fog was essential for establishing a sense of eerie, unnatural dread. The most spectacular and potentially dangerous smoke effects, however, came from simple chemical reactions. Roman stage technicians discovered that by tossing specific powdered minerals on the hot coals of a brazier, they could create sudden, colored plumes of smoke. Adding powdered amber would produce a thick, black, acrid smoke perfect for depicting ominous thunderclouds or the aftermath of a calamity. But the true showstopper was a substance called bitumen judicum, or asphalt. When thrown onto a fire, it would ignite with a greasy, black, and incredibly persistent smoke. This was likely used for the most dramatic entrances of all, such as the appearance of a fury from the depths of Tartarus or the eruption of a volcano. The thick, oily black smoke would pour forth, obscuring the stage in an impenetrable cloud before a terrifying figure would emerge from within it. This kind of effect required immense caution, as the smoke was toxic and highly flammable, but the shocking visual payoff was deemed worth the risk for the most lavish productions. The symbolic use of these effects was as sophisticated as their execution. Smoke and mist were never used at random. They were direct visual metaphors. In a comedy, a puff of smoke might accompany a character's sudden, panicked exit, played for laughs. But in tragedy, it was a profound symbol of obscurity, confusion, and the liminal space between the known and the unknown. When an oracle like the Sibyl delivered her prophecies, she was often surrounded by a swirling haze of incense smoke. This visually represented the obscurity of her visions. The message from the gods was present, but clouded and difficult for mortals to interpret clearly. The smoke was the physical form of the mystery itself. Similarly, a hero descending into the underworld would literally disappear into a manufactured bank of mist, his form dissolving before the audience's eyes as he crossed into the realm of the dead. This made a philosophical concept, the journey to the afterlife, a visceral, breathtaking reality. The Romans understood that what the audience couldn't see was often more frightening than what they could, and by strategically veiling the stage in smoke and mist, they wielded the power of anticipation and imagination, turning the theater itself into a place where anything could, and would, appear from the void. All of these astonishing effects, the flying gods, the rolling thunder, the blood-stained stages, were not created in a vacuum. They served one ultimate master, the audience. Roman special effects were engineered not just to be seen, but to be felt, transforming passive spectators into active participants in a shared, visceral experience. The goal was total immersion, a complete surrender to the illusion, and the Romans achieved this by designing effects that reached out from the stage and directly engaged the senses, emotions, and even the physical space of every single person in the crowd. This was a theater of interaction, where the line between performance and reality was deliberately and thrillingly blurred. The most direct form of this engagement was the element of surprise, orchestrated to make the entire audience jump, gasp, or recoil in unison. Playwrights and directors understood the power of a well-timed shock. A sudden blast of thunder from the bronium wasn't just a sound effect. It was a physical jolt, a vibration that rattled through the stone benches and into the bones of the spectators. When a trapdoor slammed open and a fury erupted from the hypogeum in a cloud of bitumen smoke, it wasn't happening in a distant fictional world. It was happening right there, a few feet away, the heat and smell washing over the first few rows. These effects were calibrated for maximum startle impact, creating a collective adrenaline rush that bonded the audience together in a moment of shared, primal reaction. You weren't just watching a character be terrified. You were feeling that terror yourself, your heart pounding alongside theirs. This sensory assault was often multi-directional, breaking the conventional fourth wall long before the term existed. Effects weren't confined to the central stage. In a battle scene, soldiers might burst into the orchestra area, fighting their way through the space reserved for the chorus and right up to the edge of the seating. The sound of clashing swords wouldn't just come from the stage. It would echo from the sides, from behind, making the conflict feel like it was surrounding the audience. For a scene set in a forest, stagehands might be positioned throughout the cavea, using their wind machines to create a rustling, howling atmosphere that seemed to come from every direction at once. This technique of enveloping the audience in sound and action erased the safe distance of observation. making everyone feel like they were in the middle of the environment being portrayed, whether it was a sacred grove, a raging storm, or a battlefield. Perhaps the most innovative and intimate form of audience interaction involved the deliberate targeting of other senses, particularly smell. The Romans were pioneers of olfactory storytelling, using scents to trigger deep-seated memories and emotions. As mentioned, the thick smoke from incense burners' thaumaturgia filled the air with the sacred aroma of frankincense during a temple scene, a smell every Roman associated with prayer and divinity. But they could also use scents to define a location with incredible specificity. To create the atmosphere of a rustic countryside, they might burn hay or scatter dried herbs like thyme and lavender across the hot stage braziers. For a naval battle, the pungent, salty smell of tar and seawater could be wafted through the air. In a particularly gruesome tragedy, the coppery, metallic scent of blood, perhaps from a real animal source, might be used sparingly to horrifying effect. This direct appeal to the sense of smell was a masterstroke of immersion. You could close your eyes, but you couldn't escape the scent that placed you unmistakably within the world of the play. The immersion even extended to touch. There are accounts of certain spectacular productions, particularly those funded by emperors seeking to outdo all others, where the special effects quite literally spilled into the laps of the audience. During a simulated rainstorm, the sprinkling of water from hidden pipes might intentionally miss the first few rows. For a scene depicting a volcanic eruption or a great fire, finely powdered saffron or cinnamon would be scattered from the top of the skeiny fronds. This expensive material would drift down over the crowd like glowing, fragrant ash, settling on their skin and clothing, leaving them with the tangible, spicy, scented evidence of the spectacle they had witnessed. In the most elaborate naumachia, the splash of oars and the chaos of battle would inevitably spray water into the front rows, making the audience physically feel the spray of the ocean they were watching. These were not mistakes. They were calculated risks, intended to make the wealthy patrons in the prized front seats feel like they were at the very epicenter of the action, privileged participants in a never-to-be-repeated event. This relentless pursuit of immersion reveals a deep understanding of human psychology. The Roman theater was a communal therapy session, a political tool, and a religious ceremony all rolled into one. By making the audience jump at a thunderclap, they released collective tension. By making them recoil at the smell of blood, they triggered a cathartic purge of pity and fear. By surrounding them with the sounds and smells of a battle, they reinforced a shared identity as citizens of a martial culture. The special effects were the engine of this transformation. They ensured that a visit to the theater was never a passive afternoon of entertainment. It was an event that gripped you, startled you, scented your clothes, and left you vibrating with the shared energy of thousands of others. You didn't just see the story, you lived it. And you left the theater not just discussing the plot, but comparing the experiences you had all felt together. Fortunately for us, the Romans were meticulous record keepers and boastful producers, leaving behind a wealth of written evidence that allows us to piece together exactly how these spectacles were achieved and, more importantly, how they were received. While many play scripts have been lost to time, the works that survive, combined with technical manuals and historical chronicles, provide a stunningly clear window into this world of engineered wonder. The architect and engineer Vitruvius, in his monumental 10-volume work De Architectura, offers what is essentially the ancient world's most comprehensive backstage tour. Writing for Emperor Augustus, Vitruvius didn't just describe buildings, he detailed the machinery within them. He meticulously explains the mathematical principles of acoustics, describing the precise placement of those bronze resonance vessels in the theater to optimize sound. He outlines the construction of the massive revolving periaktoi prisms for swift set changes, and provides detailed schematics for the mighty water organs, or hydraulis, that filled the air with music. His work is invaluable because it was not meant for poets. It was a practical engineer's handbook, proving these effects were not mythical exaggerations but standardized, buildable technology. For a glimpse of how these mechanics were deployed in actual performance, we turn to the playwrights themselves. The comedies of Plautus are bursting with meta-theatrical humor and direct references to the stagecraft that brings his chaotic stories to life. In his play, The Braggart Soldier, a character famously declares, "I'll go inside now and change my costume. That's the way we do it in comedies." This is more than just a joke. It's a direct wink at the audience acknowledgement of the quick change artistry that was a staple of the genre, confirming that the audience was not only aware of the mechanics but enjoyed seeing the artifice exposed. His scripts are filled with stage directions, both implied and explicit, that demand specific effects. A character disappearing through a trapdoor, another being flown across the stage on the machina, or a sudden reveal on the ekkyklema platform. Plautus wrote with the full toolbox of Roman stagecraft in mind, and his plays are a vibrant blueprint for how mechanics served comedy. In stark contrast, the tragic philosopher Seneca used the same technology to explore much darker themes. His plays are less about action and more about intense psychological suffering, but they are punctuated by moments of sheer theatrical horror made possible by special effects. In his play Theists, the climax revolves around the horrifying revelation that a character has been tricked into consuming his own children. This gruesome discovery is almost certainly revealed by the ekkyklema, the wheeled platform rolling out from the palace doors to show the aftermath of the feast in all its bloody detail. In Medea, the titular sorceress's final vengeance involves a dragon-drawn chariot sent by the sun god to carry her away. Seneca's language soars as she ascends, a moment that would have been realized using the machina crane, making her defiant, terrifying exit a visual and emotional crescendo. His works show us that the most sophisticated effects were reserved for the most profound moments of divine intervention and human atrocity. Beyond the stages, we find evidence in the encyclopedic curiosity of Pliny the Elder. His natural history is a sprawling compilation of all knowledge, and within it, he notes the materials that made the magic work. He describes the properties of different pigments and minerals, like the cinnabar used for blood effects or the asphalt that produced thick black smoke. He records the use of specific woods, resins, and metals that would have been essential for building everything from the massive stage cranes to the intricate automata. Pliny wasn't a stagehand, but his work captures the Roman drive to categorize and understand the natural resources that made their technological achievements, including theatrical ones, possible. He provides the ingredient list for the illusion. Perhaps the most telling accounts come from historians chronicling the extravagant games funded by emperors. Suetonius, in his Lives of the 12 Caesars, recounts how Emperor Nero, a performer himself, used the stage's full potential. He describes mechanisms for simulating earthquakes and elaborate sets that collapsed and reformed on command. These accounts weren't meant to praise the art, but to critique the emperor's excess. However, in doing so, they inadvertently preserve records of the most ambitious and complex effects ever attempted. The priorities revealed in these texts are unmistakable: a relentless drive for grandeur, a desire to demonstrate absolute mastery over nature through engineering, and a deep understanding that the most powerful way to communicate with a vast, diverse populace was not through words alone, but through overwhelming, unforgettable spectacle. Behind every thunderous crash and every smoothly descending deity stood the true architects of the illusion, the Roman engineers. These unsung heroes were masters of applied science, blending a deep understanding of mechanics with the materials available to them to create feats of stagecraft that were as structurally sound as they were spectacular. Their work in the theater was not an isolated hobby. It was a direct reflection of the same engineering genius that built aqueducts, roads, and the towering Pantheon, proving that Roman innovation was as much about entertainment as it was about empire. The materials they had to work with were, by modern standards, simple and finite: wood, bronze, iron, stone, and hemp rope. Yet their mastery of these substances was absolute. They understood the tensile strength of different woods, selecting flexible fir for the long beams of the machina crane and dense, sturdy oak for the winches and axles that had to bear immense loads without snapping. For the crucial moving parts, the gears of the water organ, the hinges of the trap doors, the massive sheets of the bronnium, they turned to bronze. This alloy was prized for its durability, resistance to corrosion, and ability to be cast into complex shapes, making it the perfect material for the high-stress, high-friction components that had to perform flawlessly show after show. The ropes that hoisted gods and scenery were meticulously crafted from hemp, plated for maximum strength, and treated with resins to reduce fraying, each one a critical lifeline for both the spectacle and the safety of the performers. Their true brilliance, however, lay in their profound grasp of fundamental mechanical principles. The entire theatrical experience was a symphony of simple machines orchestrated into complex miracles. The machina crane was a perfect application of the lever and the winch, using a system of counterweights to balance the load of an actor, allowing a small team of men to lower a seemingly weightless god with graceful precision. The trapdoors operated on the same pivotal principle as a lever, with carefully calculated counterweights, ensuring they could be opened swiftly and silently from below. For the massive periaktoi prisms, they employed the axle and the wheel, creating a mechanism that could be rotated with minimal effort to instantly transform the entire setting of a play. Even the awesome power of the Nemesia's flooding system was a testament to their command of hydraulics, leveraging the relentless force of gravity and the controlled flow of water through aqueducts and pipes to reshape an arena into an ocean. This technological prowess did not develop in a vacuum. The theater was a public laboratory where engineering concepts were tested, refined, and showcased for the entire populace. The precise mathematics of acoustics, explored by Vitruvius, were directly applied to the design of the theater's semicircular cavea and the strategic placement of resonance vessels. The complex pulley systems that flew actors were cousins to those used in construction to lift massive stone blocks for temples and monuments. The hydraulic engineering that filled an arena for a naval battle was the same science that supplied entire cities with fresh water through aqueducts and drained wastewater through elaborate sewer systems. A Roman citizen watching a play was also, whether they knew it or not, witnessing a dazzling demonstration of the applied science that made their daily life and their imperial power possible. Perhaps the most telling sign of their sophistication was their ingrained priority for safety. The grandeur of the effects never overshadowed the meticulous planning required to execute them without disaster. The counterweights on the crane weren't just for smooth operation. They were a critical safety feature to prevent a catastrophic drop. The use of alum-soaked, flame-retardant fabrics for pyrotechnic scenes shows an understanding of chemistry and risk mitigation. The network of water buckets and sand stored in the hypojam reveals a well-drilled backstage crew prepared for emergencies. This methodical, safety-first approach mirrors the Roman building codes and engineering standards that ensured their bridges didn't collapse and their amphitheaters could hold thousands of people securely. In the theater, as in all things, Roman engineering was a blend of bold ambition and painstaking, practical calculation, ensuring the show could not only go on, but do so again and again, thrilling generations without ever sacrificing the wonder to mere accident. While the Romans were masters of their craft, they were also the first to admit they stood on the shoulders of giants. Their entire theatrical tradition, from the genres of comedy and tragedy to the very architecture of the stage, was a direct inheritance from the Greeks. But to say the Romans simply copied their predecessors would be a profound underestimation of their innovative spirit. They took the Hellenistic blueprint and, in true Roman fashion, supersized it, amplified it, and injected it with a distinctively visceral, spectacular energy that reflected their own culture's values and appetites. The evolution from Greek to Roman stagecraft is a story of adaptation, enhancement, and a relentless pursuit of greater impact. The fundamental difference can be seen in the very bones of their performance spaces. Greek theaters, like the magnificent example at Epidaurus, were harmonious structures built into natural hillsides. Their design prioritized democratic viewing and sublime acoustics, creating an intimate connection between the performer's voice and the audience's ear. The Roman theater, by contrast, was an assertive architectural declaration. Freestanding and built from engineered concrete and marble, it was a symbol of imposed order on the landscape. The Greek orchestra was a large circular space for the chorus to dance. The Romans shrunk this area into a perfect semicircle, prioritizing the elevated stage and its towering skinny fronds backdrop. This shift in architecture signals a shift in purpose, from a communal, ritualistic gathering focused on the spoken word to a spectacular, sensory experience where the set itself was a star. This divergence is most apparent in their approach to machinery. The Greeks invented the core technologies, the machina crane, the ekkyklema reveal platform, and the periaktoi revolving prisms. Their use, however, was often restrained and symbolic. The deus ex machina in a Euripides play was a philosophical device, a divine intervention to resolve an otherwise unsolvable human dilemma. The Romans saw the same machine and asked, "How can we make it more dramatic?" Their cranes became more robust, capable of carrying heavier loads and performing more complex aerial maneuvers. A Greek god might descend. A Roman god would descend amidst smoke and mechanical thunder, then deliver a pronouncement with the booming authority of an emperor. They took functional tools and weaponized them for spectacle. Nowhere is the Roman appetite for a different kind of drama more clear than in their embrace of realism, particularly violent realism. Greek tragedy, for all its themes of murder and vengeance, largely kept the bloody aftermath offstage, reported by a messenger. The Roman tragic tradition, exemplified by Seneca, literally brought the horror into the light. The ekkyklema was no longer just for revealing bodies. It was for displaying the gruesome details of mutilation, forcing the audience to confront the physical consequences of the story's violence. This was complemented by their advanced development of stage blood and gore effects, a practical art form with little precedent in Greek theater. This shift reflects a culture that was not only comfortable with public violence, but saw it as a form of popular entertainment, as evidenced by the gladiatorial games. The Roman stage became a place where the mythical met the visceral. The Roman genius also lay in their incorporation of elements from other forms of public spectacle. The Greeks had their festivals, but the Romans created the ludi, massive state-funded games that blended theater, chariot races, gladiatorial combat, and public feasts. This cross-pollination had a direct impact on stagecraft. The pyrotechnics used in the arena likely influenced the controlled fire effects on the stage. The most staggering example is the Nemesha, the staged sea battle. This wasn't an evolution of Greek theater. It was a uniquely Roman imperial monstrosity, a logistical nightmare that dwarfed any previous theatrical endeavor in scale, cost, and sheer audacity. It represented a move away from the psychological and poetic, and toward the overwhelming demonstration of raw power, both engineering and political. Ultimately, the contrast between the two traditions reveals a contrast in cultural souls. Greek theater was an exploration of the human condition within a cosmic order, where the polis, the city-state, and the individual's place within it were central. The effects served the text and the philosophical inquiry. Roman theater was a celebration of imperial might, technological mastery, and public munificence. The effects served the spectacle and the glory of the state and its benefactors. The Romans looked at the elegant, profound toolkit left by the Greeks and added more gears, more smoke, more blood, and a much, much bigger budget. They transformed theatrical performance from a reflective art into an assertive experience, creating a legacy of spectacle that would echo through the centuries and forever change the way we think about putting on a show. Yet all this ingenuity in creating flying gods and naval battles was never just for entertainment's sake. The spectacular effects we've been exploring were far more than simple tricks. They were a powerful language, a mirror reflecting the deepest values, fears, and ambitions of Roman society itself. Every crash of thunder and every drop of stage blood was loaded with cultural meaning, reinforcing a specific worldview for the thousands of citizens gathered in the cavea. The theater was a school, a temple, and a political rally all rolled into one, and its special effects were the tools used to teach its lessons. At its heart, Roman culture celebrated virtus, a concept encompassing courage, manliness, and excellence, particularly in a military context. The hyper-realistic combat and gore effects were a direct extension of this value. For a society where military service was a path to honor and citizenship, the staged violence was a celebration of martial prowess. When an actor convincingly portrayed a hero enduring a brutal wound with stoic resolve, it wasn't merely shock value. It was a model of ideal Roman behavior. The audience, many of whom had seen real combat, would recognize and applaud the authenticity of the performance. This visceral display served as a constant reinforcement of the toughness and resilience expected of a Roman citizen, especially in an empire that was constantly expanding and defending its borders through military might. The stage was a training ground for the eyes, normalizing the realities of war and glorifying the courage required to face it. Beyond the earthly virtue of virtus, the entire theatrical experience was steeped in the divine. The lavish use of the deus ex machina and the appearances of gods and furies were not just convenient plot devices. They were a profound affirmation of the Roman religious worldview. In a society where the favor of the gods, known as pax deorum, the peace of the gods, was considered essential for the state's survival, these effects made divine intervention tangible. Seeing Jupiter descend on a mechanical crane to settle a dispute visually demonstrated that the gods were active participants in human affairs. watching over Rome and ensuring order. For the average citizen, this was a powerful reminder to maintain piety and uphold tradition. The spectacular pyrotechnics and smoke that accompanied these divine entrances blurred the line between theater and religious ritual, making a trip to the play feel like a visit to the temple. It was propaganda of the highest order, using awe-inspiring spectacle to reinforce the idea that the Roman state and its social order were divinely sanctioned. This brings us to the most potent function of this state-sponsored spectacle, outright political propaganda. Emperors and wealthy politicians were often the financiers or editors of these enormous productions. They understood that a captivated audience was a compliant one. By funding ever more lavish and astonishing shows, a ruler could demonstrate his immense wealth and generosity, a virtue known as liberalitas. The message was clear: look at the wonders I can provide for you. This was particularly effective for emperors who lacked military credentials or were from new dynasties. They could win the people's love not on the battlefield, but through bread and circuses, or in this case, through special effects. When an emperor like Nero or Titus staged a Naumachia, a sea battle requiring the logistical genius of the state's entire engineering corps, he wasn't just putting on a play. He was staging a dramatic recreation of a Roman naval victory, a spectacle that screamed, "Our empire commands the seas, and I, your emperor, command the very elements to recreate that power for your amusement." It was a breathtaking display of control designed to elicit gratitude and reinforce the hierarchical power structure with the emperor firmly at the top. Finally, the theater served as a vital pressure valve for a massive, diverse, and often restless population. By gathering citizens from all social classes into a single space and immersing them in a shared, overwhelming sensory experience, the state could foster a sense of common identity and communal catharsis. The collective gasp at a sudden stage effect or the shared laughter at a comedic trick created a powerful bond among the audience. They were united in their wonder. This communal experience helped to diffuse social tensions and direct the energy of the masses into a state-controlled outlet. It was far safer to have the public debating the stunning realism of a stage battle than discussing political grievances in the streets. The theater, with all its mechanical marvels, was a tool for social management, providing entertainment so grand that it could make people forget their troubles, all while subtly reminding them of the immense power and cultural values of the regime that provided it. This deep connection between stagecraft and spirituality meant that every performance was more than just a story. It was a form of mass religious engagement. When the trapdoor shuddered open and a spectral figure ascended through sulfurous smoke, the audience wasn't just seeing a clever trick, they were witnessing a genuine breach between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. In a culture that meticulously practiced ancestor worship and believed in active, intervening spirits, this effect was profoundly chilling and authentic. It gave tangible form to their deepest fears and beliefs about what awaited them after death. A play reenacting the journey of Orpheus to the underworld to retrieve his wife Eurydice was not simple entertainment. It was a communal exploration of love, loss, and the immutable laws of the gods, made terrifyingly immediate by the very real-looking chasm that seemed to open up in the stage floor. The grandest of these divine spectacles, the Deus ex machina, served a crucial theological purpose. In a society where the state's prosperity was believed to depend on maintaining the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, this mechanical miracle was a powerful visual reassurance. Seeing Jupiter or Apollo descend with impeccable grace to resolve a human conflict reinforced a fundamental Roman belief that the cosmos was a rational, ordered system overseen by divine will. The gods were not distant or capricious. They were active managers of human affairs who would ultimately ensure justice and restore balance. This spectacle was a direct affirmation of the religious and political status quo, subtly communicating that the established order, endorsed by the gods, was the correct and natural one. For the average citizen, it was a comforting reminder that despite the chaos of daily life, a higher power was ultimately in control, and that power favored Rome. Furthermore, these theatrical reenactments of myth served as the primary method of cultural education for a vast, diverse, and often illiterate population. The stories of Aeneas's founding of Rome, the heroic trials of Hercules, or the tragic fate of figures like Iphigenia were not merely legends. They were the foundational narratives that defined Roman values of piety, duty, sacrifice, and honor. By bringing these stories to life with such stunning realism, the theater transformed abstract moral lessons into unforgettable sensory experiences. A young Roman didn't just hear about the importance of pietas, the duty to gods, family, and country. He saw it embodied by Aeneas, perhaps even flying above the stage on his journey to found a new homeland. The spectacular effects ensured these values were felt viscerally, searing them into the collective memory and identity of every citizen who witnessed them, binding them together through a shared visual and emotional language of wonder and belief. To truly grasp the monumental ambition behind Roman stagecraft, we need to walk through the gates of a specific, revolutionary building, the Theater of Pompey. This wasn't just another venue. It was a paradigm shift, the first permanent stone theater in Rome, and an architectural declaration that spectacle was now a permanent fixture of Roman political and cultural life. Before its completion around 55 BC, Roman theaters were temporary wooden structures, built for a festival and then dismantled, their ephemeral nature reflecting a certain conservative suspicion of the corrupting influence of Greek-style entertainment. Pompey the Great shattered that tradition. His theater, a massive complex built from gleaming travertine and marble, was a permanent testament to his personal power and a gift to the Roman people that would set the standard for centuries to come. The genius of its design lay in its multifaceted nature. It was far more than a stage and seats. The Theater of Pompey was a self-contained city of entertainment. The semi-circular cavea could seat up to 20,000 spectators, all funneling their attention towards the immense scaeni fronds, a multi-storied stage building as tall as a modern 5-story apartment block. But behind this stage lay the masterstroke. Pompey topped his entire structure with a vast colonnaded garden, a public park filled with statues, fountains, and shady walkways. And at the far end of this garden, directly in line with the stage, he built a temple to his personal patron goddess, Venus Victrix, Venus the Victorious. This clever arrangement allowed Pompey to technically circumvent the old laws against permanent theaters by claiming the entire structure was merely the steps leading up to a temple, a pious offering to the gods. It was a brilliant piece of political and architectural sleight of hand. This integrated design was a playground for special effects on an unprecedented scale. The solid, permanent stone construction of the stage building meant it could support machinery of immense weight and complexity. The height of the scaeni fronds provided the necessary vertical space for the mighty machina cranes to operate, lowering gods from what would have seemed like the very heavens themselves. The deep foundations allowed for an extensive hypogeum, a subterranean world of tunnels, chambers, and trapdoors far more elaborate than anything possible in a temporary wooden theater. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of these substructures, revealing a network where actors, gladiators, and even exotic animals could be held before making their startling appearances through a multitude of charonia directly onto the stage. We can vividly imagine the sensory overload of an event here. A religious procession might begin at the Temple of Venus Victrix, winding its way through the gardens with incense smoke trailing behind, before entering the stage to begin a performance. The acoustics, engineered with mathematically precise seating and likely embedded resonance vessels, would have carried the deep notes of the hydraulis water organ and the terrifying shake of the bronze bronium sheets to every last row. For a naval battle, the orchestra area could be flooded, with small ships emerging from hidden ramps. The entire complex was a single, integrated machine for producing wonder, seamlessly blending religion, politics, nature, and technology into one overwhelming experience. The theater's historical significance is also uniquely dark. It was the site of one of history's most infamous assassinations. It was in the shadow of Pompey's statue, in a hall attached to the portico of his theater, that Julius Caesar was murdered on the Ides of March in 44 BC. This event adds a profound layer of irony to the building's legacy. A venue designed for the illusion of death and resurrection, powered by fake blood and trapdoors that swallowed characters into the underworld, became the stage for a very real and consequential political killing. The line between spectacular fiction and brutal reality, always thin in Rome, vanished entirely within its walls. The legacy of the theater of Pompey is etched into the very map of modern Rome. While much of its superstructure was quarried for later buildings, the curve of its cavea is still perfectly preserved in the layout of buildings and streets in the Campo de' Fiori area. Walking these streets today is to walk the ghostly outline of ancient Rome's greatest stage. It set the template for every major imperial theater that followed, from the theater of Marcellus to those across the empire. It proved that architecture itself could be the greatest special effect of all, a permanent engine for creating illusion, reinforcing power, and captivating the masses, establishing a standard of integrated spectacle that would define Roman entertainment for centuries. This technological brilliance was never contained within the city of Rome. The empire's genius for spectacle was a key export, a powerful tool of cultural imperialism carried across the known world. From the rain-swept hills of Britannia to the sun-baked coasts of North Africa, the unmistakable shape of the Roman theater rose from the landscape, each one a deliberate outpost of Roman identity and a testament to the widespread demand for its unique brand of entertainment. In provincial cities, a grand theater was more than a place for plays. It was a potent symbol of prestige, a declaration that this community, however far from the capital, was a sophisticated part of the Roman world. Local elites, eager to demonstrate their loyalty and their own refined tastes, often funded these constructions, effectively bankrolling their own cultural assimilation and bringing the wonders of Roman stagecraft to their own doorstep. The evidence for this widespread dissemination of special effects technology is etched in stone at remarkable sites across the former empire. The theater in Orange in modern-day France stands as one of the best preserved examples anywhere. Its towering skinny fronds, an immense wall of masonry over 100 feet high, remains almost entirely intact. This was not merely a backdrop. It was the essential rigging for the entire spectacle. The sheer, solid height of this wall provided the necessary anchor and concealment for the massive cranes and counterweight systems needed to fly deities across the stage. Dozens of corbels and beam holes, still visible today, reveal where the machinery of the machina was securely mounted. Furthermore, the stage floor at Orange is riddled with a complex pattern of slots and openings, the clear blueprint for an extensive network of trapdoors, or charonia, that would have allowed for the sudden appearance of everything from comedic characters to terrifying underworld furies, proving that the full repertoire of Roman stage magic was operational in distant Gaul. Travel to the Mediterranean coast of Libya, and the theater at Sabratha offers another stunning glimpse into this exported technology. Here, the stage building is uniquely multi-storied, with a complex system of ramps and passages that allowed actors to move between levels out of sight of the audience. This architectural complexity suggests incredibly sophisticated productions, where characters could vanish from one level and instantly reappear on another, creating a dynamic sense of action that would have thrilled the local populace. Most tellingly, archaeologists excavating the Hypocaeneum, the area directly behind the stage wall, uncovered a series of intricate stone channels. These are believed to have been part of the hydraulic system used for special effects, perhaps to create a flowing fountain on stage, or even to help simulate a minor flood for a specific scene, demonstrating how local engineers adapted and implemented the core principles of Roman hydraulic engineering for theatrical purposes. This was not a simple case of carbon copying a design from Rome. While the core architectural principles and mechanical concepts remained consistent, local adaptation was key. Theaters in the drier, hotter climates of North Africa and the Eastern Empire often featured elaborate velaria, massive canvas awnings that could be unfurled to shade the audience from the intense sun. The systems of ropes and pulleys to manage these enormous sails were likely operated by the same crews that handled the stage machinery, a practical fusion of climate control and stagecraft. The materials used also varied. In regions short on quality timber, engineers might have used local stone for counterweights or different types of strong, flexible rope made from locally sourced fibers. The plays performed might have featured local myths or historical events alongside the standard repertoire of Roman comedies and tragedies, but they would have been brought to life using the same toolkit of flying effects, trapdoors, and simulated thunder, ensuring the Roman-ness of the experience was never in doubt. The underlying message of these stone marvels was unequivocal. By building a Roman theater, a community was buying into the entire Roman cultural package. The spectacular effects were a visceral demonstration of Roman technological superiority and organizational skill. For a local farmer or merchant sitting in the cavea, witnessing a god descend on a mechanical crane or a hero vanish through the floor was not just entertainment. It was a powerful, subconscious lesson in the power of the empire that could make such miracles happen. It fostered a shared cultural experience that bound the diverse peoples of the empire together, creating common points of reference and wonder. The theater became a school for Roman values, where stories of Roman piety, military virtue, and divine favor were literally enacted before their eyes with all the convincing force of cutting-edge special effects. In this way, the export of stagecraft was one of the empire's most subtle and effective tools of control, conquering hearts and minds not with the sword, but with sheer, irresistible spectacle. Yet even the most spectacular empire eventually falls. And with the slow collapse of Rome and the rise of Christianity, the vast, state-funded engine of theatrical spectacle ground to a halt. The new religious authorities viewed the ancient plays not as cultural treasures but as dangerous pagan relics, celebrations of false gods and immoral stories. The magnificent stone theaters, those marvels of engineering and acoustics, were abandoned, quarried for building materials, or converted into fortifications. The intricate knowledge of the machina, the bronium, and the hydraulic systems that powered the Naumachia faded into obscurity, a forgotten language of wonder. For centuries, the grand tradition of sophisticated special effects seemed lost to the Dark Ages, leaving behind only silent, crumbling ruins. But the human desire for spectacle and storytelling never truly disappears. It simply finds new forms. The legacy of Roman stagecraft did not vanish, it went underground, resurfacing in the most unexpected of places, the medieval church. Within the solemn, echoing vaults of great cathedrals, priests began to stage simple liturgical dramas, known as mystery plays or miracle plays, to teach biblical stories to a largely illiterate congregation. These productions were humble at first, but as they grew more popular and moved from the altar into the town squares, they began to incorporate startlingly familiar effects. The Easter story of Christ's resurrection demanded an empty tomb, achieved by a simple trapdoor, a direct, if simplified, descendant of the Roman Charonia. To depict the ascension of Christ or the assumption of the Virgin Mary into heaven, medieval stagehands used a device called a glory or heavenly crane, a rudimentary but effective pulley system that hoisted an actor heavenward, mirroring the divine ascent of a Roman deus ex machina. The technological complexity was a shadow of its former self, but the core ambition, to make the divine visually tangible, was a direct inheritance from the Roman world. The true rebirth of Roman spectacle, however, arrived with the Renaissance. As European scholars rediscovered classical texts, they unearthed the engineering manuals of Vitruvius and Hero of Alexandria, which contained detailed descriptions of ancient theatrical machinery. This was nothing short of a revelation for architects and artists. In Italy, the birthplace of the Renaissance, this knowledge sparked a revolution in stage design. Theatrical designers like Sebastiano Serlio pored over Vitruvius's principles, reinventing the perspective scenery that could create dizzying illusions of depth on a flat stage. The Roman periaktoi, the revolving triangular prisms used for instant set changes, were revived and refined into more complex systems of sliding flats and shutters. The passionate interest in all things classical extended to special effects, fueling a new era of technological experimentation aimed at replicating the wonders of the ancient world for a modern audience. This technological revival reached its zenith in the lavish court spectacles of the 16th and 17th centuries. For royal weddings, state visits, and grand celebrations, rulers employed the finest artists and engineers to create performances of unprecedented opulence. These were the direct heirs to the Roman ludi, designed to showcase the power and wealth of the patron. The Florentine Camerata, a group of musicians and intellectuals, sought to recreate ancient Greek drama and, in doing so, inadvertently invented opera, a new art form that demanded spectacular visual accompaniment. The flying machinery used to lower Greek gods in these early operas was a sophisticated reimagining of the Roman machina. Perhaps no one better embodies this fusion of ancient inspiration and Baroque extravagance than the Italian architect and stage designer Nicola Sabatini. His famous Manual for Constructing Theatrical Scenes and Machines, published in 1638, is a virtual encyclopedia of Renaissance stagecraft that reads like a direct conversation with Vitruvius. In it, he provides meticulous instructions for creating rolling thunder effects using stone balls in a trough, simulating lightning with ignited fireworks, and crafting devilish appearances through fire and smoke, updating every single one of Rome's greatest hits for a new age. This continuous thread of innovation, stretching from the Roman hypogeum to the flying systems of the modern stage, proves that the ingenuity of those ancient engineers never truly died. The fundamental principles they established remain the bedrock of theatrical illusion. Every time an actor in Peter Pan soars above the audience, they are flying on the perfected descendant of a Roman counterweight system. When a phantom vanishes through a solid wall in a modern musical, the secret is a precision-engineered trapdoor that would be intimately familiar to a stagehand in Pompey's theater. The very language of backstage crew is still filled with Latin terms, a subtle nod to its origins. The Romans were the first to systemize stage magic, to treat it as a serious engineering discipline rather than a collection of ad hoc tricks. They understood that for an audience to believe in the story, they first had to believe their eyes, and they devoted immense resources to making the impossible seem not only possible but present. In doing so, they laid the entire foundation for 20 centuries of theatrical technology, gifting us a legacy of wonder that continues to define the magic of live performance today. But how do we move from admiring these silent ruins to truly understanding the roar of the crowd and the shudder of the stage? For decades, the incredible special effects of the Romans existed only in the pages of ancient texts, fascinating descriptions that often felt more like mythology than historical fact. That is, until a new generation of historians, archaeologists, and engineers decided to stop just reading about the past and start rebuilding it. Through the fascinating field of experimental archaeology, they are taking Vitruvius's blueprints and Hero of Alexandria's diagrams off the parchment and into the workshop, using authentic tools and materials to reconstruct these ancient machines. Their goal is simple yet profound: to test these ancient descriptions in the real world and discover what these effects actually looked like, sounded like, and felt like for a Roman audience. One of the most ambitious modern projects took place at the University of Regensburg in Germany, where a team led by classicist Dr. Christoph Scheffer and engineer Dr. Christian Koops embarked on a mission to build a fully functional Roman water organ, or hydraulis, from the ground up. The process was a masterclass in ancient engineering. They sourced specific types of wood and bronze, forged tools based on Roman designs, and meticulously followed the sometimes cryptic instructions from ancient sources. The biggest challenge was achieving an airtight seal for the air compression chamber, a problem they finally solved using a technique described by Hero, submerging the entire welded bronze tank in a bath of finely milled wheat flour, which was drawn into the tiniest pinhole leaks and formed a perfect, natural seal when wet. The moment they pumped the hand-operated bellows, and the first deep, powerful chords resonated from the organ's pipes, was a revelation. The sound was not a delicate whisper. It was a commanding, complex instrument with a rich tone that could easily fill a large theater, proving definitively that the Romans possessed the acoustic technology to create a truly immersive musical score for their dramas. Perhaps the most iconic effect to be tested is the mighty Deus Ex Machina. A team from Britain's BBC, working with historians, constructed a working model of the crane based on Vitruvius's specifications, using wood, hemp rope, and a counterweight system. Their experiment confirmed its elegance and practicality. With a well-balanced counterweight, a single operator could smoothly lower an actor weighing nearly 200 pounds with surprising control and grace. The real test, however, was putting an actor in the harness. The experience was described as both terrifying and exhilarating. The initial lurch of the descent was unnerving, but once in motion, the ride was stable, allowing the god to focus on delivering a commanding performance rather than clinging on for dear life. These reconstructions reveal that the effect was not a clumsy, jerky contrivance, but a surprisingly sophisticated piece of engineering that could create a truly majestic and believable divine entrance. Beyond individual machines, some projects aim to recreate the entire sensory experience of a Roman performance. At the annual European Festival of Latin and Greek in various cities, troupes perform ancient plays like Plautus's comedies using reconstructed techniques. They use simple, reversible costumes for lightning-fast character changes, just as the Romans did. They employ a hidden scabularii, a performer who sits off stage rhythmically stamping his scabilla, or wooden clappers, on a board to provide a percussive beat for dancing scenes. The most thrilling moment for modern audiences is always the use of the ekkyklema, when the wheeled platform rolls out to reveal the aftermath of a comedic brawl or a tragic murder. The gasps and laughter from the crowd are immediate. It's a powerful demonstration that these 2,000-year-old gags and dramatic reveals still work perfectly on a human audience today, proving the timelessness of well-executed stagecraft. What do these hands-on experiments ultimately teach us? They move us beyond speculation and into the realm of practical understanding. They confirm that the Roman accounts were not exaggerated boasts, but accurate descriptions of working technology. More importantly, they reveal the incredible ingenuity and resourcefulness of Roman engineers. Working without formal physics textbooks or computer models, they possessed an intuitive, profound understanding of mechanics, leverage, and acoustics. They solved complex problems with elegant, simple solutions, using a bag of flour to seal a metal tank, or a stack of stones to perfectly balance the weight of a flying actor. Every successful reconstruction is a testament to their skill and a humbling reminder that technological sophistication is not solely defined by microchips and electricity. By rebuilding their world, we don't just learn about the Romans. We reconnect with a shared heritage of human creativity, rediscovering the simple, stunning magic that made their stories soar. Despite all the ingenious reconstructions and the wealth of historical accounts, the Roman stage still holds onto some of its most tantalizing secrets. For all our knowledge, there are effects described in ancient texts that leave modern historians and engineers scratching their heads, their methods seemingly lost to time without a single archaeological clue. These gaps in our understanding are not failures of scholarship. They are thrilling reminders of the boundless creativity of ancient innovators and the fragile nature of technological knowledge. One of the most perplexing enigmas revolves around the grandest of all spectacles, the Naumachia, or staged sea battle. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio describe immense naval conflicts with dozens of ships taking place in the flooded Colosseum. But the mechanics of how this was actually achieved remain hotly debated. The arena's hypogeum, the underground network of tunnels and chambers, is an astonishingly complex structure, but its drainage capacity is a subject of intense scrutiny. Could the Romans really have filled and emptied that vast space with water quickly enough for it to be a practical venue for such shows? Some theories suggest these colossal events might have taken place in purpose-built basins elsewhere in Rome, like the one constructed by Augustus, and that the descriptions of Colosseum Naumachia were either poetic exaggerations or referred to smaller-scale mock battles. The lack of definitive plumbing evidence in the Colosseum's basement keeps this mystery thrillingly alive. Another enduring puzzle comes from the pages of Hero of Alexandria's manuscripts, which describe automata of incredible complexity, self-playing musical instruments, mechanical birds that sang, and even miniature automated theaters that performed entire plays. While we have his detailed diagrams and believe the Romans had access to this knowledge, no archaeological evidence of such sophisticated devices has ever been found in a theatrical context. Were these marvels ever actually built at full scale for the stage, or were they confined to the realm of philosophical toys and temple wonders? The sheer technical ambition described is breathtaking, suggesting a level of mechanical nuance that seems to rival the clockwork of the 18th century. Without a surviving gear or axle from a large-scale theatrical automaton, we are left to wonder if the Romans truly staged plays with moving statues that turned their heads and poured libations, or if these ideas remained brilliant theoretical concepts, blueprints for a spectacle that was never fully realized. This gap between description and physical proof is a powerful invitation to imagine what might have been. Perhaps the most intriguing mysteries concern the effects that, by their very nature, were designed to leave no trace. Consider the use of chemicals and volatile compounds for pyrotechnic displays. The texts mention throwing bitumen judicum asphalt onto fires to create thick, black smoke for a fury's entrance, or using powdered resins to create a flash of lightning. What other chemical recipes did they develop? Could they have created colored flames or different colored smokes using various mineral salts? These would have been consumable effects, leaving behind only ash and the memory of their brilliance. The recipes for these ancient special effects concoctions, passed down orally among stagehand guilds, have been completely lost to time. We can only speculate about the full palette of visual and olfactory wonders they might have deployed to terrify and delight their audiences. The absence of evidence here isn't a void. It's a canvas for our imagination, prompting us to consider the full scope of their artistic daring. This lack of physical evidence also fuels scholarly debates about the frequency and scale of these effects. Were the flying gods and rolling thunderclaps reserved only for the most lavish, state-funded productions in Rome itself? Or were provincial theaters across the empire equally equipped? The stone beam holes and slots in a place like the Theater of Orange prove the machinery existed, but how often was it used? Was a typical Tuesday afternoon comedy performance a relatively simple affair, saving the full technological arsenal for festival days and imperial celebrations? The daily grind of Roman theater, the practical realities of a repertory company managing these complex effects show after show, remains largely hidden from us. We see the potential for spectacle in the architecture, but we can't always know how regularly that potential was unleashed. These unanswered questions do more than just highlight the limits of archaeology. They profoundly humanize the ancient Romans. They remind us that their genius was not a monolithic, infallible force, but a living, evolving practice of experimentation, success, and occasional failure. Some effects were undoubtedly triumphs, while others may have been ambitious flops. A god jerking awkwardly on a poorly calibrated crane, a smoke effect that refused to clear, a blood bladder that failed to burst on cue. The fact that we can even conceive of these mishaps bridges the gap of millennia, connecting us to them not as distant, perfect marvels, but as fellow creators pushing the boundaries of their technology. These mysteries ultimately ensure that the Roman theater is not a closed book, but a living inquiry, a conversation between the past and the present that continues to inspire wonder and challenge our assumptions about the ancient world. Looking back across the centuries, the true legacy of the Roman theater isn't found in the crumbling stones of an ancient stage or the faded ink of a manuscript. It lives on in the very DNA of our modern entertainment. Every time you feel your seat rumble with a deep bass note in a movie theater, you are experiencing the direct descendant of the Roman bronium, shaking the very foundations of the cavea. When a superhero soars across a CGI sky, they are tracing the flight path first mapped by a counterweighted crane lowering Jupiter towards the stage. The sudden appearance of a ghost through a misty floor in a film, the meticulously timed squibs of blood in an action scene, the enveloping soundscape of a video game. All of these are the spiritual heirs to the ingenuity that flourished 2,000 years ago. The Romans were the first to systemize wonder, to treat illusion not as mere trickery, but as a sophisticated language of storytelling, and in doing so, they built the foundation upon which all subsequent spectacle rests. This enduring influence is a powerful testament to a universal human drive, the irrepressible need to tell stories that are not just heard, but felt. The Roman engineers and artists understood that to truly captivate an audience, to transport them completely into the world of the myth, you had to engage every sense. It wasn't enough to tell a spectator that a god had arrived. They had to see the figure descending from the heavens, hear the simulated thunder that announced his presence, and feel the vibration in their bones. They transformed the stage from a simple platform into a multidimensional portal. And in doing so, they discovered the fundamental principles of immersion that filmmakers and game designers still strive to perfect today. Their work proves that the heart of special effects has never been about the technology itself, but about the timeless desire to believe in the unbelievable, if only for a moment. So the next time you lose yourself in a blockbuster film or a breathtaking theatrical production, take a second to tip your hat to those ancient innovators. Think of the stage hands sweating in the hypogym, waiting for their cue to unleash a thunderclap or erupt a ghost through the floor. Picture the actor, heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration, being hoisted into the air by a system of ropes and counterweights, trusting entirely in the skill of the engineers below. And most of all, try to place yourself in that vast, energized crowd. Imagine the shared gasp of 20,000 people as the sea battle begins, the collective jump at a sudden flash of lightning, the roar of laughter as a character vanishes through a trapdoor. They were not so different from us, seeking an escape, a thrill, a connection to something grander than themselves, and they were rewarded with a kind of magic that still has the power to amaze. We would love to hear which of these ancient effects captured your imagination the most. Was it the sheer scale of the Namasha, the divine spectacle of the Deus ex machina, or the gritty realism of the stage blood and gore? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What feat of Roman engineering would you have most wanted to witness with your own eyes? If you enjoyed this journey into the spectacular past, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Until then, keep wondering.